Welcome to Breaking the Set. I'm Abby Martin. So while everyone's waiting on pins and needles to wait to see if the U.S. attacks Syria or not, the death toll resulting from America's previous Middle East misadventure continues to rise. Just yesterday, at least 67 Iraqi citizens were killed after multiple car bombings tore through central Baghdad. And you know what? Most of you probably didn't even bat an eye at that number, because in the aftermath of America's imperialist experiment, that's just a regular Tuesday in Iraq. We're only 4 days into September, and already 106 Iraqis have been killed by car bombs, gunfire, suicide bombers, or IEDs, according to RockBodyCount.org. And this past July, the country saw its deadliest month since the height of U.S. occupation, with more than 1,000 Iraqis losing their lives. Month after month, the incessant violence has relegated each individual death into a sea of statistical anonymity, to be forever forgotten by the country most responsible. And the best part, well, we're getting ready to do it all over again. Tired of this vicious cycle yet? You come to the right place. Let's go break the set.
It was a terrible mistake, and we're working very hard to make up for it.
And once again, to put something on the air, it's a flat-out lie.
Have you ever had sex with Governor Rick Perry?
No, wait, do not answer that.
I want you to watch what we're about to do, because you've never seen anything like this on television.
What we need is to question more and to keep it uncensored, real and raw. My simple mission is to change the globe. I'ma do it with this passion and fire and tone. These words are hard hitting, you're watching your neck, but you need to tune in, because we're breaking the set. Breaking the set. Breaking the set.
I've talked a lot on this show about the emerging technologies that have contributed to the overblown surveillance state we now live in. Everything from RFID chips and student IDs to miniature flying drones that mimic insects. There are too many innovative spying technologies to count. They're being employed by a whole host of government agencies and corporations. But if there's any glimmer of hope, it's from looking at the other side of the coin, the counter surveillance technologies that are being created to reverse this trend. Well, RT's Amir David explored just that by taking a look at how anti-surveillance might just be taking fashion by storm. Take a look.
When some people think of anti-surveillance gear, they might think of this, the one and only tinfoil hat. The headgear was thought by some to be a shield from electromagnetic fields, a tool that could prevent the government from reading their minds.
But even though the tinfoil hat concept didn't quite pan out, it hasn't stopped a desire to find new ways of shielding the public from the government's ever-expanding eye.
Just take Stealthwear, a new line of apparel that implements anti-drone technology into clothing. The collection boasts 3 garments, each designed with a metallized fabric that protects against the same thermal imaging surveillance used by UAVs. It's a technology creator Adam Harvey says will revolutionize the way we think about what we wear.
I see it as something that opens the door to bringing counter-surveillance into fashion. I'm trying to create the future of fashion that I would like to see.
That's right, anti-surveillance meets fashion, a collaboration that's starting to gain widespread attention, with another Harvey creation going well beyond clothing. It's called CV Dazzle, and it's camouflage from computer vision. It works by combining makeup and hairstyling to throw off facial recognition software.
Facial recognition software typically focuses on a small triangular area, starting above the eyes, going down to the chin, which means to thwart any camera, you'd probably have to look something like this.
It's an innovative idea that's caught the eye of one Miami artist who's using YouTube to teach the public just how it can be done.
We all know that cameras are monitoring us at all times. So I wanted to give you this makeup tutorial as a gift to teach you how to avoid being facially recognized.
But it's not only camouflage makeup taking root. Other face-hiding techniques are trending on the runways. Just take a look at some of the world's top fashion designers. Umit Benin, who recently used Turkish-inspired disguises for his collection, or Martin Margiela, who displayed full-out head-encasing masks in his designs. It's an emerging fashion that's no surprise to Epic's Amy Stepanovich, who says it's all a result of the country's growing surveillance apparatus.
people are looking for ways to get around having their rights violated, having their lives kind of filmed 24/7. So it's a natural extension to move from these very privacy invasive technologies to privacy friendly solutions, specifically in the commercial market.
So with the government only expanding its use of visual surveillance, this fashionable privacy gear might be in heavy use sooner than you think. Amira David, RT, Washington.
Let's talk a little bit more about these emerging technologies and where the demand is coming from. I'm joined by BTS producer Amira David. Thanks
Hi,
so much for coming on. So Amira, frankly, I'm a little bit surprised to see so many of these technologies being developed right now. Why now? Why is there such a demand now when really drones aren't going to be overhead for a couple more years?
People are just starting to see the surveillance apparatus grow. We've seen it grow tenfold. Obviously, we know at this point by the year 2020, we should expect to see 30,000 drones flying above head. That's a kind of crazy number to grapple with. Drones are just so commonplace these days. In fact, they're so common, we have little gadgets that they're selling at, Sharper Image and Brookstone that people can just fly as like a household gadget. There's huge advancements in facial recognition software, both in being used by the government and being used in the private sector. On top of that, you have companies like Google who are creating Google Glass. This is basically giving you a third eye that, with the sole purpose of spying and recording everything that's in plain sight, and people that are on the other end of that have no idea that they're being recorded. So I think that people are really learning about these technologies and starting to wake up to the fact that it's going to challenge their civil liberties.
Yes, and I think it's awesome as the NSA becomes more in kind of the public conversation, the public dialogue, and that's really great that we're seeing people who wouldn't normally be involved in the public discourse about that be taking the initiative with this. You mentioned special anti-surveillance makeup, which I thought was really awesome, seeing you put on the facial recognition stuff. But people who aren't interested in getting super glammed up with makeup every day, how do they
That might be a little too funky for the majority of Americans, but it's not in the United States yet, but in Japan, the National Institute for Informatics has basically developed this new privacy visor, and it's still in the beginning stages, but it basically works by emitting near infrared lights that confuse facial recognition software. The coolest thing about it is that they're easy to put on, right? They're so accessible. Just throw them on your face. There's not a lot of work at hand.
And it's really cool. We can check it out right now.
Well, this is actually the facial recognition I touched on in the story. But the goggles are super cool because the light doesn't affect the vision of the person wearing them, and it only disguises the face from cameras, not from people. So to the human eye, you're going to look the same. So it's kind of a cool device.
And that's what we're seeing right now. Really, really crazy, futuristic looking stuff there. Besides what you can wear, though, I also heard you talking about a device called Off Pocket.
Yeah,
what is that?
This is a new accessory, and it's supposed to launch next month. It's made by the same person that launched the CV Dazzle and the stealthware. His name is Adam Harvey. And basically, it works by using specialized metal fabric that blocks pretty much everything. It blocks phone signals, it blocks Wi-Fi, it blocks GPS, all internet connections. I don't think that people realize that your phone is trackable, it's traceable, and even if you turn it off, there are little methods the government can use to still sort of track you. So this is the way you just throw it in this little pocket, and then it's off the radar completely. And this is, I think, going to actually really gain a lot of traction.
That's amazing. Usually you want to have more access, more ability to get on Wi-Fi and service. You're not trying to block it, but in the age of surveillance, yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Do you think that we're really going to start to see people really integrating these technologies, though, with everyday wear? Because it seems like they're still a little bit out there.
It does right now, and I think for the sort of the majority of Americans, I think this is not going to gain traction, but I think it is, though. The reality is that, as drones are becoming more pervasive, security cameras, they're growing by the thousands in multiple cities. Social networking is sort of starting to incorporate facial recognition software. So as these sort of technologies become more sophisticated, so will the counter products to them. And so I think they're going to become more popular in the coming years.
And as it becomes more fashionable to be anti-spying, anti-surveillance, and pro-civil liberties, hopefully we'll see that taking it by storm and really infiltrating the mainstream. Thank you so much, Amira David. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
See the headlines now. Nobel Peace Prize winning president jumpstarts World War III. Now, in case you have no idea what I'm talking about, here's just a taste of the incessant propaganda that's being forced down our throats.
We believe very strongly, with high confidence, that in fact chemical weapons were used and that Mr. Assad was the source.
We cannot afford for Hezbollah or any terrorist group determined to strike the United States to have incentives to acquire or use chemical weapons. The Syrian regime's actions risk eroding the nearly century-old international norm against the use of chemical weapons.
From a national security standpoint, we have to send a very clear message to those who have weapons of mass destruction of any variety that they should forget about using them.
You know, I feel like I'm having deja vu because there's something about this rhetoric that just feels so familiar. It's almost like I've heard it before.
It is up to Iraq to show exactly where it is hiding its banned weapons, lay those weapons out for the world to see, and destroy them as directed. Nothing like this has happened.
We have first-hand descriptions of biological weapons factories on wheels and on rails. In a matter of months, they can produce a quantity of biological poison equal to the entire amount that Iraq claimed to have produced in the years prior to the Gulf War.
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction. There is no doubt that he is amassing them to use against our friends.
Yes, apparently the establishment thinks that we're so stupid that we'll just lap up the exact same talking points used for the Iraq War. Hell, they could have just replaced the word Iraq with Syria and called it a day. However, now the stakes are much higher. Iranian leadership has already said that a U.S. strike on Syria would result in a counterattack against Israel. And Israel, well, they have a huge stake in toppling Assad as a way to destroy Hezbollah and Hamas, thus further weakening Iran's influence on the region. At first, Obama seemed happy to attack Syria without any congressional approval. But now, after some outcry, his administration is putting up the sham of placating the people by going through the democratic motions. Even though Kerry said Obama has the right to attack regardless of how Congress votes. So this week was the beginning of the charade of deliberation on the Hill. And I'm really happy to hear that some of the most fervent war hawks took the debate seriously enough to put away their video games. But no one has been beating the war drums harder than Secretary of State John Kerry. And being the best propagandist he can be, Kerry's given multiple impassioned speeches about Assad's chemical weapons arsenal.
And I believe, as President Obama does, that it is also important to discuss this directly with the American people. That's our responsibility, to talk with the citizens who have entrusted all of us in the administration and the Congress with responsibility for their security.
You know, Mr. Secretary, I agree with what you're saying, but that's not what you guys are doing at all. See, right now, support for an intervention in Syria is actually less popular than Congress, which says a lot when you consider how unpopular Congress actually is. But hey, I guess having 100% support from the defense industry trumps that measly 9% support from the American people. And what about the Syrians? Well, sadly, the bloody civil war has so far claimed over 100,000 lives. But suddenly the time to act is after an arbitrary red line has been drawn in the sand.
With our own eyes, we have seen the thousands of reports from 11 separate sites in the Damascus suburbs. All of them show and report victims with breathing difficulties, people twitching with spasms, coughing, rapid heartbeats, foaming at the mouth, unconsciousness, and death. This is the indiscriminate, inconceivable horror of chemical weapons. This is what Assad did.
Appeal to emotion much? You know, for a second there, I thought Kerry was describing the horrors of a night raid in Afghanistan or a drone bombing in Yemen. Because really, what's the difference in how your innocent child dies? So, according to Kerry, there are thousands of reports proving the Assad regime used chemical weapons. Now, reports, of course, that we can't see. But what about the reports that I have seen that say the complete opposite? Like how the UN said that the rebels were previously using chemical weapons, or that the Saudi intelligence community sold the rebels chemical weapons. So forgive me if I don't believe your good word at face value, Mr. Secretary. But I think it's more than fair that you present the hard evidence you claim you have to the American public. After all, we're the ones paying for the cruise missiles you plan to drop over Damascus. Oh, but that's right. All this evidence you have is classified. I mean, really? The Bush administration at least cared enough about us to present falsified evidence to the UN. So what else did Kerry have to say?
So the primary question is really no longer, what do we know? The question is, what are we collectively, what are we in the world going to do about it? It matters that nearly 100 years ago, in direct response to the utter horror and inhumanity of World War I, that the civilized world agreed that chemical weapons should never be used again. And it matters deeply to the credibility and the future interests of the United States of America and our allies.
You know, man, Kerry, you just don't seem to get it. The U.S. uses chemical weapons routinely in modern warfare, whether it be white phosphorus or depleted uranium in Fallujah. So what gives this country the moral authority to be the world's policeman on the matter? And you're asking what the international community is going to do about it. Let's do a quick roll call, shall we? The UK, America's partner in crime, which together doctored intelligence to invade Iraq, doesn't even want anything to do with this war. The UN, who said yes to the Libya debacle, has said it would be illegal to strike without approval by the Security Council. And wouldn't you know it, France seems to be the only country backing unilateral action. So I'm confused. If freedom fries are French fries again, when are we going to start boycotting fish and chips? But seriously, we're waiting for people that don't represent us to vote to kill Syrians, to show the Syrian regime that killing Syrians is wrong. Look, guys, one thing is clear. This war is not about terrorism. If it were, this country wouldn't be financially backing al-Qaeda to topple Assad. It's certainly not about chemical weapons or humanitarianism. Is it really just a coincidence that there always seems to be a humanitarian crisis only in countries that the U.S. military and its corporate oligarchs have yet to conquer? You tell me.
I would rather ask questions to people in positions of power instead of speaking on their behalf. And that's why you can find my show, Larry King Now, right here on RT. Question more.
Five seconds. And over the mic is all fueling to go.
Did you know the press is the only industry specifically mentioned in the Constitution?
Stand by.
That's because a free and open press is critical to our democracy.
Track Alpha. Roll Alpha.
In fact, the single biggest threat facing our nation today is the corporate takeover of our government and our press.
Stand by, camera one.
We've been hijacked by a handful of powerful transnational corporations that will profit by destroying what our founding fathers once built up. I'm Tom Hartman, and on this show, we reveal the big picture of what's actually going on in the world. We go beyond identifying the problem. We try to fix it. Rational debate and a real discussion of the critical issues facing America.
Stand by on camera, go.
Ready to join the movement? Then welcome to the big picture.
Well, guys, the beating of war drums about Syria has conveniently distracted us from the NSA spying scandals going on right here in the U.S. Thanks to whistleblower Edward Snowden, we're learning more and more about the backdoor policies being employed in the name of national security. Just last week, the colossal intelligence gathering apparatus was exposed, showing an overblown system that has grown astronomically since 9/11. In fact, those documents also revealed an enormous black budget that sits at $53 billion. And most notably, the NSA's operations have grown by over 50% since 2004. What is really going on here? Why is a government that claims to be broke continuing to bolster up its intelligence apparatus? Here to provide some insight on this, I'm joined by the man who sparked national controversy back in 2005 when he exposed that the NSA was engaged in unconstitutional wiretaps of American citizens, the original NSA whistleblower, Russ Tice. Thank you so much for coming back on the program.
Thanks for having me back.
So, Russ, the last time you were on, you gave extremely explosive allegations that I have so far not heard picked up by the corporate media about that you had in your hand orders to wiretap then Senator Barack Obama, Justice Alito, Senator Feinstein, and you've also speculated that the wiretapping orders came from Vice President Dick Cheney, former Vice President Dick Cheney. Why do you think that he would be ordering those wiretaps?
Well, initially, it probably had something to do with politics at that point, or whatever they wanted to do with their ventures in Iraq or whatever else they were doing. But it sort of moved at that point into, not only Democrats were being wiretapped, but Republicans were being wiretapped. And then I even saw the president's own press secretary was being wiretapped. Scott McClellan, I think was his name. So it seemed to just sort of germinate into something much more. And then ultimately, I don't know for sure, but it would almost seem that it got to a grand scale where it was not just a political, sort of venture or something that would be used against a political opponent.
Do you think that he was vetting candidates at all that would inherit the policies? Do you think that anyone from the Bush administration is still kind of working behind the scenes, or, as you said, has it just morphed into something so much greater entirely?
Well, I think when I saw Justice Alito's wiretap information, I think, because that was, if I recall, that was kind of late 2005, and that was towards the end of when I had access towards this information. I think that was them vetting candidates, and apparently Alito was one of the candidates. Obviously he was, because he became the justice to be chosen. So in that respect, yes. The fact that Barack Obama was wiretapped literally before he became a U.S. Senator kind of gives me the indication that apparently because of his speech at the Democratic convention in 2004, that they realized he was an up-and-comer in the Democratic Party and decided to go after him.
I always thought it was really interesting how he was barely anything, and then all of a sudden he's just skyrocketing to now being the President of the United States, basically having absolutely no political history really in the Senate. You've talked quite a lot about the potential for blackmail here. Does anyone else agree with you that has worked in the NSA? And have you seen any evidence at all to back up the fact that this is indeed the case?
Well, I mean, I still have friends that work inside of NSA, and we have talked over the years, and I don't think any of us are at a high enough pay grade to determine that. So it's speculation on our part. I was told by a very senior person at NSA that originally the wiretapping was directed by the Vice President, Vice President Cheney. After 2005, we really didn't have much access after that point because things started getting really crazy with the FBI and the Justice Department, the witch hunt at NSA, and I had them on me 24/7 for quite some time after that. So it was very difficult. So I can't give you a definite answer on that.
Well, speculation is good enough for someone who's worked within the industry for so long, Russ. You've also said that you speculate the intelligence community is really running the show here based on what you've found out and seen. Are you suggesting that it's Clapper or Alexander who's really running the country? I mean, who really do politicians answer to?
Well, politicians are supposed to answer to their constituency and the people.
Clearly that's not the case.
That's what's supposed to happen. But if we have an instance where the intelligence community can basically have dirt on whoever they want, they can basically back the candidate that they have the ability to have sway over. And like I said, I don't know that that's happening for sure, but we saw Barack Obama as candidate Obama say a whole lot of things that he was going to clean up the intelligence community. That certainly didn't happen, and it seems to me the intelligence community has gotten whatever it wanted from Barack Obama.
Who do you think they're answering to?
Themselves.
Who in the intelligence community?
Well, if it was the intelligence community, it would be the upper echelon of the intelligence community. It would be the Clappers and the Alexanders and formerly the Haydens and the power brokers inside the intelligence community would be pulling the strings at that point.
Russ, why isn't the NSA being held accountable for anything? I know you just said that they're kind of, if they are running the show, of course, that's obvious. But, you wrote something to me really interesting today talking about how the corporate media fits into all of this and why the NSA is unable to hold itself accountable. I just wanted you to elaborate on that.
Well, corporate media, if you look at who owns different corporate entities or the media, quite often these corporations have a lot of business that they do with the government. And I've also come out and said that the media and journalists and news organizations were also spied upon by NSA. I knew one of the reporters that I was initially talking to, James Risen, I knew when I was talking to him that his phones were tapped. So it meant that I had to be very careful what I said. And remember, that's at the point where NSA tried to put the crazy stamp on my forehead so that no one would believe anything that I said. They did that on purpose.
So are you suggesting that the NSA is also potentially blackmailing members of the corporate media in order for them to have the access that they do?
I think, I can't say that for sure, but I think journalists now, and if you were to ask James Risen and he were to answer, that journalists have to be concerned about what they're doing and then ultimately being hauled in front of a grand jury to give up sources or themselves go to jail. That is something that's happening right now. And then you have news organizations that their corporate entities ultimately control what they will or will not cover.
And it's scary to see them essentially echoing the political establishment line when they're supposedly, these independent corporations. Let's talk about why you said that the NSA and the FBI were kind of on your back when you were coming out initially. Why is it that you have not been charged with espionage?
Well, I was very careful. When I communicate with my sources, we have a no electron policy. So we don't use phones, we don't use computers, we don't do any of that sort of thing. Any documentation we have, we review and we destroy immediately. So we don't go to some Canadian, encryption site to try to communicate with whoever because we know that's very dangerous, as Thomas Drake found out. So we know what to watch out for. We know what we're doing, and I know that they cannot make the nexus between me and my sources.
And unfortunately, that's the way we all need to act right now with this retroactive prosecution. And the blackmail thing is just a really terrifying concept. Russ, thank you so much for coming on, breaking down a little bit more of your story. Russ Tice, former NSA intelligence analyst.
My pleasure.
That's it, you guys. Thanks everyone at home for tuning in, and please come back to Break the Set all over again with me tomorrow.